I destroyed the best relationship I ever had because I wasn't ready for someone who actually loved me properly. And I'm telling you this story because maybe you'll recognize something in yourself before you make the same mistake I did. It was 2022, and I was fresh off a relationship with someone who had systematically torn down every piece of confidence I'd built over the years. You know how some people leave you questioning your own reality? That was him. When I finally found the strength to leave, I thought I was healed. I thought I was ready for something real. I was wrong. I met Kieran through a dating app when the algorithm still worked in our favor. His profile didn't immediately grab me. He seemed too polished, too put together. But something about his smile made me swipe right anyway. He messaged me within hours, and we were meeting for drinks by the weekend. Walking into that wine bar downtown, I spotted him immediately. He was exactly as advertised. Tall, broad shoulders, dark hair pulled back in a way that should have looked pretentious, but somehow worked perfectly on him. When he stood to greet me, I felt that flutter of attraction mixed with something else I couldn't quite identify. Fear, maybe. "Arya?" His voice was warm, confident, without being cocky. "You look beautiful." Most guys would have gone for the awkward hug or the too casual wave. He took my hand, squeezed it gently, and looked me directly in the eyes. It was such a simple gesture, but it caught me completely off guard. We talked for 4 hours that night. He was a physical therapist who'd grown up in Montana, moved to the city for graduate school, and stayed because he loved the energy. He asked thoughtful questions, not just about my job as a marketing coordinator, but about what I wanted to do with my life, what made me feel alive, what scared me. I found myself sharing stories I hadn't told anyone in years. I used to write, I admitted, when he asked about my creative outlets. Short stories, mostly. I had this dream of getting published, but life got in the way. "What kind of stories?" he asked, leaning forward like my answer was the most important thing he'd hear all day. "Character studies, I guess. People at crossroads, making decisions that change everything," I laughed, suddenly self-conscious. It sounds pretentious when I say it out loud. "It sounds like you understand people," he said simply. "That's a gift." No one had ever called my writing a gift before. My ex used to say it was a waste of time, that I should focus on more practical things. But Kieran was looking at me like I'd just revealed something precious. By our third date, I was spending nights at his apartment, a cozy one-bedroom with exposed brick walls and plants everywhere. He cooked for me, actual meals with vegetables and spices I'd never heard of. He'd light candles and play jazz while we ate, asking about my day like the details actually mattered to him. "You don't have to take care of me," I told him one evening as he massaged my shoulders after a particularly brutal day at work. "I want to," he said, his hands working out knots I didn't even know I had. "Is that okay?" The question threw me. My ex never asked if his behavior was okay. He just took what he wanted and expected me to adjust. But Kieran was always checking in, always making sure I was comfortable, always putting my needs first. Within a month, we were official. He brought it up over breakfast, coffee, and homemade pancakes that he'd somehow perfected despite claiming he wasn't much of a cook. "I know this might be moving fast," he said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "But I don't want to see other people. I don't want you to see other people. I want to see where this goes." I should have felt panicked. In my previous relationships, official meant trapped. But with Kieran, it felt like safety, like coming home. "I'd like that," I said, and I meant it. The first time he met my parents was at their anniversary party. I'd been dreading it for weeks. My mother had a talent for making my boyfriends feel inadequate, and my father barely acknowledged their existence. But Kieran showed up with flowers for my mom and a bottle of my dad's favorite whiskey. And within an hour, he was deep in conversation with my uncle about hiking trails in Colorado. "He's a keeper," my mother whispered to me in the kitchen. "Don't mess this up." Even then, I felt a strange resistance to her words, like she was trying to box me in, force me into a future I hadn't chosen. But watching Kieran laugh with my cousin's kids, seeing how naturally he fit into my family, I felt something I'd never experienced before. the possibility of a life that was stable and happy and uncomplicated. It terrified me. 3 months in, Kieran surprised me with a weekend trip to a cabin in the mountains. He'd noticed me scrolling through Instagram photos of forest retreats and bookmarked my wistful comments about needing to escape the city noise. The cabin was exactly what I'd imagined. Rustic wood beams, a stone fireplace, windows that framed the pine trees like living paintings. "How did you know?" I asked, as we stood on the wraparound porch, breathing in the crisp mountain air. "You light up when you talk about nature," he said, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "I wanted to see you in your element." We spent the weekend hiking, reading by the fire, making love in a bed that smelled like cedar and rain. He'd brought along my favorite wine, the specific brand of tea I drank when I was stressed, and a notebook he'd picked up at a local bookstore. "For your stories," he said when I found it on the nightstand. "Maybe being up here will inspire something new." I should have been touched by his thoughtfulness. Instead, I felt a familiar prickle of anxiety. How long had he been watching me, cataloging my preferences, planning this perfect weekend? It felt calculated, orchestrated, like he was trying to manufacture moments instead of letting them happen naturally. "This is really sweet," I said, but my voice came out flat. "You don't like it. It wasn't a question." "I do. It's just a lot." He was quiet for a moment, staring out at the mountains. "I'm coming on too strong, aren't I?" "No, it's not that, but wasn't it? I just don't want you to feel like you have to perform for me." "I'm not performing. I care about you. I want to make you happy." "But what makes you happy?" I asked, turning to face him. "What do you want?" "This," he said simply. "You, making you smile. Seeing you excited about something. That's what makes me happy." It was the perfect answer, and it made me feel trapped. Where was his selfishness, his demands, his list of ways I needed to change to better suit his needs? I'd spent so long defending my boundaries against men who wanted to reshape me that I didn't know how to handle someone who seemed to love me exactly as I was. That night, lying in bed while he slept peacefully beside me, I stared at the ceiling and wondered what was wrong with me. Here was a man who anticipated my needs, who listened to my dreams, who made me feel like the most important person in his world, and all I could think about was how to find fault with it. I started testing him in small ways. I'd mention wanting to try a new restaurant, then change my mind at the last minute to see if he'd get frustrated. He'd just smile and suggest we cook together instead. I'd ask his opinion on movies, then pick the opposite just to see if he'd argue. He'd settle in next to me on the couch and get genuinely invested in whatever I'd chosen. "Don't you have preferences?" I asked him once, after I'd switched from his suggestion of a thriller to a romantic comedy. "Sure," he said, pulling me closer. "But I'd rather watch something that makes you happy than something that makes me happy and you miserable." "That's not how relationships work," I said, though I wasn't sure what I meant by that. "How do they work?" I didn't have an answer. All my previous relationships had been about negotiation, compromise that felt like losing, constantly advocating for my own needs. With Kieran, it felt like he was always trying to make sure I won, and I didn't know how to handle that dynamic. The worst part was that I could see my behavior affecting him. He started second-guessing his gestures, asking permission before doing thoughtful things, holding back in ways that made me feel both relieved and disappointed. I was turning him into a nervous version of himself, and I hated that I was doing it, but I couldn't seem to stop. "I feel like I'm walking on eggshells," he admitted one evening after I'd snapped at him for bringing me coffee without asking if I wanted it. "I never asked you to walk on eggshells," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew they weren't fair. I had asked for that. With every eye roll, every dismissive comment, every time I'd made him feel like his kindness was an imposition. "I don't know how to love you," he said quietly. "I don't know what you need from me." "I need you to be yourself," I said, but I wasn't sure I meant it. "I am being myself. This is who I am. I'm someone who wants to take care of the person I love. I don't need to be taken care of. I know you don't need it, but I need to give it. That's how I express love. And you're making me feel like there's something wrong with that." He was right, and I knew it. I was punishing him for being different from the men who had hurt me, for offering freely what I'd had to fight for in the past. I was so used to love being conditional that unconditional love felt like a trap. The first crack appeared at his brother's wedding. I'd been looking forward to meeting his family, but from the moment we arrived, I felt like an outsider. His brother's wife was polite but distant, asking surface-level questions before turning her attention elsewhere. His parents were kind but seemed to be sizing me up, measuring me against some invisible standard. I spent most of the reception nursing a glass of wine and watching Kieran navigate the social dynamics with ease. He belonged here, in this world of established careers and 5-year plans and matching china patterns. I felt like I was playing dress-up in someone else's life. "You're quiet tonight," he said when we got back to the hotel room. "Your family doesn't like me," I said, kicking off my heels and collapsing onto the bed. "That's not true," he sat beside me, running his fingers through my hair. "They're just protective. They need time to get to know you. Your sister-in-law barely spoke to me all night. She's shy around new people, and honestly, she's probably intimidated by you." Intimidated by me? You're brilliant and beautiful and independent. That can be threatening to some people. I wanted to believe him, but the seed of doubt had been planted. I started noticing things. How his friends would exchange glances when I expressed an opinion. How conversations would shift when I joined them. How I always felt like I was performing rather than just being myself. The thing is, Kieran never made me feel that way. He celebrated my independence, encouraged my ambitions, defended me when others didn't. When his brother made a comment about my unconventional career path, Kieran shut it down immediately. "Arya is incredibly talented," he said firmly. "She's building something meaningful, not just following someone else's blueprint." But instead of feeling supported, I felt exposed. Like he was trying too hard to make me fit into his world, and we both knew I didn't belong there. The doubt started small, a nagging feeling that something was missing, that we were too different, that this was all too easy. In my previous relationships, I'd had to fight for attention, for affection, for basic respect. With Kieran, all of that was freely given. I should have been grateful. Instead, I felt unsettled. "I feel like we're roommates sometimes," I told him one night as we watched a movie on his couch. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. It's too comfortable, too predictable." He paused the movie and turned to face me. "Is that bad?" "No, it's just I don't know. I feel like something's missing. What can I do? How can I fix this?" The question broke my heart because I could see how much he wanted to make it work. But I didn't know what was wrong, only that something felt off. I was 28 years old, and I'd never been in a relationship where I felt cherished rather than tolerated. My nervous system didn't know how to process safety. I started picking fights over nothing. When he'd ask what I wanted for dinner, I'd get irritated that he couldn't just decide. When he'd check in about my day, I'd accuse him of being controlling. When he'd suggest we try something new together, I'd complain that he was trying to change me. "I feel like you don't trust me to make decisions," I told him, after he'd deferred to me about vacation plans. "I want you to be happy," he said, looking confused and hurt. "I want us to do things you want to do. But you never have opinions about anything. You just go along with whatever I say." "I have opinions. I just care more about your happiness than getting my way." "That's not healthy," I shot back, though I couldn't explain why. Looking back, I realized what I was really saying was, fight with me, push back, make me work for your love the way I've always had to work for everyone else's. The constant giving and consideration felt foreign, unearned. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for him to reveal his true, selfish nature. But he never did. When I'd snap at him for minor things, he'd ask what was really bothering me. When I'd withdraw and go cold, he'd give me space, but let me know he was there when I was ready to talk. When I'd test his boundaries, he'd hold firm without being cruel. "I love you," he said one night after a particularly ridiculous argument about how he loaded the dishwasher. "I don't know what's happening with us, but I love you, and I want to work through this." "Maybe love isn't enough," I said, and I watched something break in his eyes. The end came on a perfectly ordinary Wednesday. We were supposed to have dinner at his place, but I'd had a terrible day at work. A client had rejected a campaign I'd spent weeks developing, and I was feeling raw and defeated. Instead of comfort, I wanted chaos. I wanted drama. I wanted someone to match my energy and spiral with me. Kieran met me at the door with a glass of wine and a concerned expression. "Rough day?" he asked, pulling me into a hug. "The worst," I said, but instead of melting into his arms, I pulled away. "I can't do this anymore." "Do what?" "Talk to me." "This," I gestured between us. "Us. It's not working." He was quiet for a long moment. "What's not working?" "Everything. Nothing. I don't know." I was pacing now, energy crackling through me like electricity. "I feel like I'm suffocating." "I'm suffocating you?" "The relationship is suffocating me. The expectations, the routine, the niceness of it all. You're breaking up with me because I'm nice to you." When he said it like that, it sounded insane, but I was too far gone to back down now. "I'm breaking up with you because we're not compatible, because I need something you can't give me." "What do I need to give you? Tell me, and I'll do it." "You can't change who you are, Kieran. And I can't change who I am either." I left that night with a bag of my things and a promise to come back for the rest later. He didn't fight me on it, didn't beg or plead or make a scene. He just stood in his doorway and watched me go. And somehow that hurt more than any argument would have. I threw myself into work, into dating apps, into proving that I'd made the right decision. I told myself I felt free, untethered, ready for adventure, but mostly I felt empty. The guy I started seeing a month later was everything Kieran wasn't. Unpredictable, emotionally unavailable, exciting in all the wrong ways. He'd text me at midnight asking if I wanted to come over, then go radio silent for days. He'd take me on spontaneous adventures, then criticize my choices when I didn't live up to his expectations. He kept me guessing, kept me on edge, kept me working for scraps of attention. I told myself this was passion. This was what had been missing with Kieran. This push and pull, this constant uncertainty. This feeling like I had to earn love rather than simply receive it. It took 6 months for him to break my heart so thoroughly that I finally understood what I'd given up. He ended things via text message, explaining that he'd reconnected with his ex and realized what he'd been missing. The casual cruelty of it sent me into a tailspin that lasted weeks. I found myself thinking about Kieran's gentle hands, his patient listening, his unwavering support. I thought about how he'd never once made me question my worth, never left me wondering where I stood, never treated my feelings as inconvenient or excessive. I'd thrown away stability and chosen chaos. I'd rejected safety and chosen uncertainty. I'd turned my back on love and chosen the familiar pain of trying to earn someone's affection. It was my mother who finally helped me see it clearly. I'd shown up at my parents' house on a Sunday afternoon, tear-stained and hollow-eyed, and she'd taken one look at me and shaken her head. "You broke his heart," she said simply. "That boy loved you completely, and you broke his heart." "He was too good for me," I said, collapsing into her arms like a child. "No," she said firmly. "You just weren't ready for someone who was good to you. There's a difference." She was right, of course. I'd spent so many years in relationships where I had to fight for basic respect that I'd forgotten what it felt like to be cherished. When Kieran offered me unconditional love, my wounded heart had interpreted it as weakness rather than strength. I'd been conditioned to believe that if someone loved me easily, they must not know me well enough. That real love required struggle, required proof, required constant negotiation. I'd confused chaos with chemistry, conflict with compatibility. The truth was, Kieran had checked 8 out of 10 boxes on my impossibly long list of requirements. But instead of appreciating what we had and working together on the rest, I'd focused on the missing pieces. I'd expected perfection instead of partnership. I wrote him a letter, an actual handwritten letter, apologizing for how I'd handled things. I didn't ask for another chance or try to explain away my behavior. I simply acknowledged that I'd been wrong, that I'd hurt him, and that I hoped he'd find someone who could appreciate all the love he had to give. I never sent it. Some apologies are meant to help the person apologizing, not the person who was hurt. But writing it helped me understand what I'd lost and what I needed to heal before I could ever be in a healthy relationship again. It took 2 years of therapy to untangle the patterns that had led me to sabotage the best thing that had ever happened to me. I learned about attachment styles, about trauma responses, about how our earliest relationships shape our expectations of love. I learned that my nervous system had been trained to associate love with uncertainty, safety with boredom, peace with the absence of passion. I learned that I'd been looking for someone to complete me rather than complement me, someone to fill all my empty spaces rather than support me in filling them myself. I'd expected Kieran to be everything: leader and follower, decisive and deferential, strong and sensitive. Instead of accepting that he was human, with his own strengths and growing edges. Most importantly, I learned that relationships aren't found fully formed. They're built day by day, choice by choice, through compromise and communication and the willingness to see your partner as they are, rather than as you wish they were. I never tried to contact Kieran after that letter I didn't send. I heard through mutual friends that he'd started dating someone new, a physical therapist like himself, who seemed to appreciate his quiet strength. I was happy for him, in the way you can be happy for someone you love when you know you are never going to be the right person for them. But sometimes, late at night, I think about what might have been if I'd been ready to receive his love, if I'd been brave enough to believe I deserved kindness without having to earn it, if I'd been wise enough to see that boring and stable weren't the same thing, that predictability could coexist with passion, that safety could be the foundation for adventure, rather than the enemy of it. I think about the life we might have built together. Quiet Sunday mornings and shared dreams. Fights that ended in understanding rather than wounds. Love that grew steadier rather than more desperate over time. I think about the woman I might have become if I'd stayed with someone who believed in me completely. But then I remember that I wasn't that woman yet. I needed to break my own heart to understand what I'd been doing to others. I needed to experience the absence of love to recognize its presence. I needed to sit with my own patterns long enough to change them. The man who loved me too well taught me that I was worthy of love without conditions, without games, without the constant performance of being someone else. He showed me what it looked like to be chosen every day, not just in the beginning when everything felt new and exciting. I sabotaged my own happiness because I wasn't ready for it yet, because I thought I needed to suffer to prove I was alive, to struggle to prove I was strong, to fight to prove I was worthy. Now I know better. Now I know that the right person doesn't make you question your worth. They make you remember it. They don't make you work for their love. They give it freely and trust you to treasure it. They don't complete you. They inspire you to become complete on your own. I'm grateful to Kieran for loving me too well, even though I couldn't receive it then. He set a standard for how I deserved to be treated, and he showed me what I was capable of inspiring in another person. He loved me enough to let me go when I couldn't love him back the way he deserved. Sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is the memory of how it feels to be truly loved. Even if you're not ready for it yet, even if you throw it away, even if you spend years regretting the loss. Because eventually, if you're lucky and you do the work, you might become someone who can recognize that gift when it's offered again. Someone who can receive love without suspicion, give it without keeping score, and build something beautiful with another person who's ready to do the same. That's the person I'm working to become. Not perfect, not healed of every wound, not immune to making mistakes, but someone who can recognize love when it's real, someone who can stay when things get comfortable, someone who can choose partnership over chaos, someone who won't sabotage her own happiness the next time it comes knocking at her door.